Okay, here's your icebreaker question to get you started for today. Do you have any weekly habits? Do you have any habits that you do every week, and why? What are those habits, and why do you do them every week? Talk about that with your group to get you started. And when you're ready to dive into the scriptures, you can press play on the video. Well, I have plenty of habits that I do every week. Some of them are as simple as taking the garbage out so that the garbage doesn't pile up. One of the habits that I have is that I will weigh in every week. It's for my physical health, so I will check my weight. If I don't do it more often than that, at least once a week. Um, I don't like doing that. It's not necessarily the most fun thing for me. Um, I'm not an exercise buff or somebody who is focused on my physical health all the time. But as I get older, I'm recognizing how important that is, and so um, I put habits in place. I'm drinking more water. I'm making sure that I eat the right kinds of foods. I will exercise on a regular basis, and I watch my weight as a way of kind of recognizing if I'm in range or out of range. I'll check other things too, like my resting heart rate and so forth. And it's to let me know if I should be spending more time on the treadmill. It's kind of an elliptical kind of a treadmill kind of a thing that we have here at home. Should I be spending more time exercising? Should I be changing my eating habits, etc.? So that check-in is something that helps me physically. What we're doing this week is we're starting to talk about healthy habits that are spiritually healthy habits, and the reason is that physical exercise, it has value, but the value is in this life. But as Paul was writing to his protege Timothy, he said that there's a different kind of training that has greater value. It has a value in this life and a value even when we leave this life. And so, what I'd like for you to do is to read the scripture there where Paul is writing to Timothy in that letter, and talk about that a little bit. Sort of dive into what is the value of physical exercise, and then what is the value of the kind of exercise that Paul talks about in that passage, um, and why is it better? Why is it more valuable than physical exercise? When you're done with that discussion, press play, and we will continue with the video. Training for godliness can seem a bit overwhelming when we start thinking about the fact that our God is an infinite God. We also can, especially nowadays, get the picture that training for godliness means that I need to go to college, or I need to take advanced training of some sort and get a degree in theology or philosophy, and really dive into books like I'm doing for my schooling right now. But the reality is that God does not intend to or want us to be overwhelmed by the idea of godliness or drawing near to God. In fact, God makes God's self very accessible to us so that we can reach out to and draw near to and walk together with God. God made this very clear to the Israelites all the way back in the days of Moses and when he encountered God at the burning bush. God came and met Moses right where he was working as a shepherd that day. God met the Israelites in Egypt, brought them out of Egypt, and then met them at Mount Sinai. And God made it clear to them that it was important to God that they did not just encounter God that one big time when they walked through the Red Sea with walls like water like walls on either side. It wasn't important to God that they just encounter God at Mount Sinai. It was important to God that they regularly, consistently, weekly met together with each other and encountered the living God. Um, the day that they would do that was called a day of rest or a Sabbath. It was the day that we now call Saturday. And every week they would gather together. They would remind themselves, they would rest from their regular work and set apart that day to encounter the living God. Um, we talk about the Ten Commandments a lot, and in churches and so forth, and we embroider them and we put them on posters and we put them out in our front lawn. But I don't know how often we really read the Ten Commandments. And this isn't all 10. These are just the beginning ones that start out with talking about the relationship with and encountering God. Read this section of Exodus and talk about that a little bit. Why was it important for the Israelites to encounter God every week, to take a day of Sabbath rest to encounter God? When you're done reading that and talking about that, you can press play and we'll go on to the next section. As a pastor, one of the questions I'll get on a regular basis when somebody finds out that Sabbath really refers to Saturday, it refers to the last day of the week, which is Saturday, and then I'll get the question, well, then why do we get together on Sunday? Why do we have church services on Sunday to encounter God? Why don't we go and gather together on Saturday? And in our history, there have been times where we've had Saturday services as well. But the reason Sunday is the focus for most churches of different Christian denominations is that Sunday is the first day of the week. And on the first day of the week, something special happened. And it all revolves around Jesus. Sunday was the day that Jesus rose from the dead and showed himself to everyone so that they saw that he was alive after he had died on the cross for all of us. There's a whole bunch of our faith that is built around Jesus' death on the cross and then resurrection on the third day. And what we see in the early church is that they started to gather together on Sunday to celebrate that on the first day of the week. The reality is that many of these early Christians, probably the 3,000 that were baptized on the day of Pentecost, were all Jewish. And there's a really good chance that they continue to honor the Sabbath the way they used to because of their Jewish heritage, and then gather together on Sunday, on the first day of the week, to celebrate Jesus, who is the Christ that they were looking for from their Jewish heritage. That's how we end up with the weekend that we have. We have Saturday and Sunday off for a lot of folks still today. The weekend comes from that. Saturday being the Sabbath, Sunday, the first day of the week where Jesus rose from the dead. Well, I answered the first question that I have there for you on your piece of paper, but read those passages. And then what I'd like you to do is to take a time with a whiteboard or whiteboards, right? With a whiteboard or a piece of paper, and just jot down some of the things that Christians did, the early Christians did when they gathered together. What were some of the details of their gathering, and how did that help them to encounter God? Talk about that with your group, and when you're ready to go to the last section, go ahead and press play to continue. Well, I don't know what you came up with on your lists, but here are some of the things I see. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. The apostles' teaching are what we have now captured in the pages of the New Testament. So what the apostles taught about the Gospels, we have in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. What the apostles wrote in letters, we have captured in the epistles. What we have in the book of Revelation is a prophecy that was given to the Apostle John. So when we read the scriptures, when we read our Bibles, we are devoting ourselves to the apostles' teaching. Fellowship is about sharing life with each other, life on life. Breaking of bread, they're talking about having meals together, but the reality is that other scriptures let us know that those meals were the time where they celebrated what we call the Lord's Supper, or a time of communion. And of course, prayer, where they were praying for one another and lifting up their requests before God, trying to get themselves aligned with God by talking to God in prayer. We also see things like the offerings that come in, so that the work of God's church would continue. The offerings were brought in specifically so that the hungry would be fed, and the naked would be clothed, and the good news would continue to be preached to, shared with all people of all nations, which means that it supported the workers of the church, much like the Levites and the priests were supported in the Israelite system. Now we have a new church system where it's being supported by those offerings. Anyway, those are some of the things that they would do, and those are things that you will most probably see in your church as components of your gathering together. All of that is for one purpose. It's to help all of us to encounter God, to see God, to draw near to God, to worship God. It's not a game, and it's not a show. It is about all of us drawing near to the living God. As you read this last passage, there's an encouragement from the writer of Hebrews that simply says that let's continue gathering together for that purpose, to encourage each other and spur one another on in our faith in and our walk with God. And so as you read that last passage, let me just encourage you. Whatever your church home is, wherever you go to church services, keep doing it, please. Keep doing it. Do whatever it takes for you to encounter God, and not just encounter God alone, but encounter God together in fellowship with others. That was a part of the list. Gathering together with people who also want to encounter God. Know that I'm praying for you as you go to your prayer time, that all of us will be faithful in gathering together every week to encounter God. God bless.